The afternoon sun filtered through the wide windows of Rosie's diner, casting long shadows across the checkered floor. It was the kind of place that had been standing on Maple Street for 40 years, serving coffee that was always hot and pie that reminded folks of their grandmother's kitchen. Sarah Mitchell sat by the window in her wheelchair. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail and her hands rested on a textbook spread open before her. She was studying for her community college exam. At 23 she had learned that life moved at its own pace, and she had made peace with that years ago. The diner hummed with its usual afternoon rhythm. The coffee maker gurgled. Plates clinked in the kitchen. Old Mr. Peterson sat at the counter reading his newspaper like he had every day since his wife passed. Everything felt safe and ordinary. Then the door swung open and 4 young men walked in. They were loud in the way that youth sometimes is when it hasn't yet learned that volume doesn't equal importance. They slid into the booth behind Sarah, laughing about something on one of their phones. At first Sarah paid them no mind. She had learned long ago to focus on what mattered, and right now that was the chapter on American history she needed to memorize. But their voices grew louder and she caught fragments of their conversation. They were making jokes, cruel jokes, about her. Her cheeks flushed but she kept her eyes on her book. She had been through this before. The stares, the whispers, the casual cruelty that some people wielded without thinking about the wounds they left behind. One of the young men stood up. His name was Derek, though Sarah didn't know that. He walked over to her table and leaned down so close she could smell the cologne he wore. "What are you studying so hard for?" he said with a smirk. "It's not like you're going anywhere." His friends erupted in laughter. Sarah's hands trembled slightly but she kept her voice steady. "Please leave me alone," she said quietly. "What was that?" Derek said louder now. "I couldn't hear you over all that wheelchair squeaking." He reached out and with a casual cruelty that took her breath away he slapped her textbook off the table. It hit the floor with a loud thud and pages scattered across the tiles. The diner went silent. Mr. Peterson looked up from his newspaper. Rosie, the owner, appeared from behind the counter, her weathered face tight with anger. "You boys need to leave," she said. Her voice carried the authority of someone who had raised 5 children and wasn't about to tolerate nonsense in her establishment. Derek held up his hands in mock surrender. "We were just having a little fun, lady. Can't anyone take a joke anymore?" "Out," Rosie said, pointing to the door. "Now." The young men laughed as they walked out, pushing each other and making more jokes. The bell above the door chimed as they left and the diner returned to its quiet rhythm. But something had changed. The air felt heavier. Sarah bent down from her wheelchair trying to reach her scattered papers. Her eyes were wet but she refused to let the tears fall. Mr. Peterson stood slowly from his stool and walked over. He knelt down with a soft grunt, his old knees protesting, and began gathering her things. "Don't you pay them any mind, sweetheart," he said gently. "The world has always had fools in it. The trick is not letting them take up space in your heart." Sarah managed a small smile. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson." Rosie brought over a fresh cup of coffee and a slice of apple pie. "On the house, honey," she said, patting Sarah's shoulder. "You sit here as long as you like. This is your place too." Sarah tried to focus on her studying but the words blurred on the page. The encounter had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. Not because it was new but because it reminded her that no matter how far she had come there would always be people who saw her wheelchair before they saw her. An hour passed. The sun shifted lower in the sky, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. Sarah was beginning to pack up her things when she heard the rumble. It started as a distant sound like thunder on a summer afternoon. Then it grew louder, deeper. The windows of the diner vibrated slightly and several customers looked up with curiosity. 6 motorcycles pulled into the parking lot. They were big machines, chrome gleaming in the afternoon light. The riders wore leather vests with patches that told stories of roads traveled and brotherhood earned. The door opened and the bikers walked in. They were an imposing sight. Big men with beards and weathered faces. Men who looked like they had lived full lives and carried both the joys and sorrows that come with that. But the man who led them had kind eyes. His name was Frank and he was 62 years old. He had served in the military, worked as a mechanic, raised 2 daughters and buried a wife he loved with his whole heart. These days he rode with his brothers because the road was the only place he felt truly at peace. The bikers took up several booths near the back. Rosie walked over with menus, her expression cautious but not unfriendly. "What can I get you boys?" she asked. Frank smiled. "Coffee for everyone. And whatever pie you've got. We've been riding since dawn and could use something sweet." As they settled in, Frank noticed Sarah by the window. Something about the way she sat, very still, very quiet, caught his attention. He had learned over the years to read people, and he saw something in her posture that spoke of recent hurt. He walked over slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Excuse me, miss," he said gently. "I don't mean to intrude, but are you all right?" Sarah looked up surprised. "Yes," she said. "I'm fine, thank you." Frank nodded, but he didn't move away. His daughter Emily had been in a car accident when she was 17. She had recovered, but he remembered the months of rehabilitation, the wheelchair, the looks people gave her. He recognized that particular kind of weariness in Sarah's eyes. Rosie appeared beside him. "Frank, these are good people," she said quietly. "But there were some young men in here earlier. Gave this young lady a hard time. Knocked her books right off the table." Frank's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. "That's so. It's okay," Sarah said quickly. "They're gone. It's over." Frank returned to his table where his brothers were drinking coffee. He spoke to them in low tones and they listened. These were men who had lived long enough to understand that strength wasn't about intimidation. It was about standing up when standing up mattered. One of the bikers, a man named Tommy who worked as a teacher, spoke up. "Those boys outside." Frank nodded. They had noticed the four young men hanging around the parking lot, still laughing, still making jokes. They hadn't gone far. The bikers stood as one. They walked outside and the young men looked up, startled by the sudden appearance of 6 very large, very serious-looking men. Derek tried to maintain his bravado. "Something we can help you with, old-timers." Frank stepped forward. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Actually, yes. We heard about what happened inside. About what you did to that young lady." Derek scoffed. "We were just messing around. She needs to lighten up." Frank moved closer. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. "Let me tell you something, son. I'm 62 years old. I've seen a lot in my time. Good people and bad. People who lift others up and people who tear them down. You want to know the difference between a man and a boy. A man doesn't need to make himself feel big by making someone else feel small." The young men shifted uncomfortably. Derek's bravado was fading fast under Frank's steady gaze. Tommy stepped forward. "I teach high school," he said. "Every day I see kids trying to figure out who they are. Some of them learn kindness. Some of them learn cruelty. But here's the thing about cruelty. It's easy. Kindness is what takes real courage." Another biker named Pete spoke up. His voice was rough from years of shouting over motorcycle engines. "That girl in there, she's working hard. Studying. Building a life. What are you doing? Making jokes in a parking lot. Think about that." Derek looked at the ground. His friends were silent. Frank reached into his wallet and pulled out some bills. "You're going to go back in there," he said. "You're going to apologize. Really apologize. And you're going to give this to Rosie to cover that girl's meal and anything else she wants." The young men walked back into the diner. Sarah looked up, startled, as Derek approached her table. The bikers followed, standing a respectful distance away. "Miss," Derek said. His voice was different now. Smaller. "I'm sorry. What I did was wrong. What I said was wrong. You didn't deserve that." Sarah studied him for a moment. She could see he meant it, or at least he was beginning to understand why he should mean it. She nodded slowly. "Thank you." The bikers stayed for another hour. They drank coffee and ate pie and talked with Rosie about the old days when the diner first opened. Frank made sure to stop by Sarah's table before they left. "You keep studying," he said. "The world needs people like you. People who keep going even when it's hard." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but this time they were different tears. "Why did you do that?" she asked. "Stand up for me." Frank smiled. "Because someone once stood up for my daughter when she needed it. And because it's what decent people do. We look out for each other." As the sun began to set, the bikers mounted their motorcycles. The engines roared to life and they pulled out of the parking lot one by one. Sarah watched them go, and for the first time that day she felt something she hadn't felt in a while. Hope. She returned to her textbook, but now the words came easier. The world still had cruelty in it. That would probably never change. But it also had people like Frank and Tommy and Pete. People like Rosie and Mr. Peterson. People who understood that kindness wasn't weakness. It was the strongest thing there was. Outside, the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and orange. The diner on Maple Street glowed warm in the fading light. And inside, a young woman studied for her future, knowing that she wasn't alone. Because sometimes the angels who watch over us wear leather vests and ride motorcycles. And sometimes all it takes to change someone's day is to show them that they matter. That they're seen. That they're valued. That's not just kindness. That's love in its purest form. And that's a lesson worth remembering no matter how old we get.